All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are going to impartially unpack a pretty wild, chaotic, and rapidly escalating series of events surrounding India's most popular teacher. Based strictly on our source material, we're going to look at how a beloved educator suddenly found himself right in the middle of a massive national storm. We're talking violent attacks, sudden criminal charges, and just an immense amount of media scrutiny. So let's cut through the noise and separate the actual timeline of events from all the swirling narratives out there. Okay, let's dive into this. The central mystery of our explainer really kicks off in the dark, on the night of June 2nd in Musalapur Hut, Patna. Now, normally this is a bustling hub where millions of students travel with the shared dream of studying for government jobs. But on this specific night, the peace was completely shattered. A prominent coaching center was violently attacked by a mob of about 15 to 20 people. They were throwing stones, destroying offices and hoardings, and a security guard was actually beaten so severely he ended up in the hospital. And then, echoing through the dark, came the sound of gunfire. But as the source points out, the real twist here isn't just that a coaching center was attacked, it's whose coaching center was attacked. To really grasp the sheer gravity of this incident, you gotta understand the target. The center belonged to a man known to millions simply as Khan Sir. I mean, we are talking about a guy with over 25 million subscribers on YouTube. He built this massive, incredibly loyal following, starting from just a small room with a camera, a board, and a real passion for breaking down complex topics using jokes and stories. He is, quite literally, one of the most famous and influential educators in the entire country. But here's where things get really weird. Within days of the attack, the narrative flipped completely upside down. The contrast here is just staggering. Before June 2nd, Khan Sir was widely praised. I mean, while other institutes were charging these astronomical fees, he was providing highly affordable education to students who really needed it. He even opened a hospital in Patna offering incredibly cheap healthcare. We're talking blood tests for just 7 rupees, ECGs for 25 rupees. Yet mere days after his own institute was attacked, he was hit with an FIR, a First Information Report, charging him with attempt to murder and violations of the Arms Act. Think about that. The victim of the attack suddenly became the prime accused. So how exactly does that happen? Well, the source lays out 2 very different stories here. The initial police investigation didn't even find evidence of gunfire. But actually, scratch that, because a day later, a video surfaced showing 2 of Khan Sir's own security guards firing into the air. When the police arrested the guards, they claimed that Khan Sir explicitly ordered the shooting. According to the police, he allegedly told them, "What are you waiting for? Fire. I'll handle whatever happens." But Khan Sir vehemently denies this. He says, absolutely not. The guards fired strictly in self-defense. Why? Because an armed mob was nearly beating one of them to death, they were threatening to bomb the building, and the police were just taking too long to arrive. Now, what's really interesting about this is how rapidly the media reacted. According to the source material, the news coverage shifted literally overnight. News channels that used to invite him on as an honored guest suddenly launched what the source describes as a highly targeted campaign. They stopped calling him Khan Sir and started pushing the name Faisal Khan. They started branding him the coaching mafia. They were running these huge headlines declaring him an absconding criminal being hunted by special investigative teams. And they brought on guests who accused him of everything from stealing his coaching center to illegally occupying land. In just 9 days, his entire public persona was dismantled by the press. Which brings us to a really critical question. Would the entire national media apparatus really launch a coordinated, aggressively hostile campaign over a local late-night dispute between rival coaching centers in Patna? The source material strongly argues, no way. That's unbelievable. They suggest the June 2nd shooting was really just a convenient excuse. To find the real catalyst, the source tells us we have to rewind the clock by exactly 1 month. So let's rewind to May 3rd. This was the date of the NEET exam. If you don't know, that's the massively important medical entrance test in India. Over 2.2 million students sat for this exam. But it was quickly revealed that the exam paper had been leaked beforehand. This totally compromised the futures of millions of students, many of whom come from families that take on literally crushing amounts of debt just to afford the preparation for this one test. Naturally, this leak triggered massive outrage. And Khan Sir, he became one of the absolute loudest voices demanding accountability. He didn't just express a little disappointment. He took direct aim at the National Testing Agency, the NTA, and the government. He was out there publicly stating, when NGA has spread filth, who else should be held responsible for it? He heavily highlighted the deep financial pain these students were going through, and when the government gave what he saw as totally inadequate responses, like, for instance, suggesting they use the Air Force to transport papers, he openly mocked them. He pointed out that the papers were being leaked by the people printing them, not while they were in transit. All of this vocal activism essentially set the stage for a massive confrontation on May 29th. During a televised debate about the exam leak, a prominent pro-government news anchor tried to deflect the blame away from the authorities. Instead, she insulted the protesting educators, basically calling star YouTube teachers worthless and claiming they only cared about racking up views and making money. While Concert led the counterattack, he publicly called the anchor a fraud, a brown-noser, and a traitor of fake news, criticizing the media for protecting the government while actively attacking teachers. And this brilliantly illustrates the core argument of our source material. I mean, just look at how fast this moved. The timeline really speaks for itself. May 3rd, the exam leaks. May 29th, Concert publicly humiliates a major news anchor for defending the government. Just 4 days later, on June 2nd, his center gets violently attacked. 3 days after that, on June 5th, he's hit with an attempted murder charge. And coincidentally, his building is suddenly flagged for fire safety violations. And then, on June 7th, the legal climax hits. The source argues this rapid, sequential escalation absolutely proves this wasn't just a coincidence. It was coordinated retaliation for him speaking out. In that June 7th climax, it came in the form of a massive lawsuit. The very same news anchor, Anjana Kashyap, who Khan Sir had called out during the debate, filed a staggering 20 million rupee defamation case against him in the Delhi High Court. To put that into perspective, it's a huge sum. This, according to the source, was essentially the peak of the media and legal machinery, coming down on him for his outspoken criticism. But the source goes even further, arguing that Khan Sir is really just the most visible example of a much broader strategy to silence dissent over systemic corruption. The source outlines several tactics they say are being used across the board. First, pushing a Hindu-Muslim narrative, like suddenly obsessing over Khan Sir's real name and religious practices, just to distract the public from the actual paper leaks. Second, outright intimidation. For example, the day after students protested in Uttar Pradesh, the government suddenly seized 3 large coaching centers belonging to teachers who had supported them. And third, actively deploying fake agents to discredit the legitimate anger of the youth. Let's move to and see how this builds, because the source provides a highly specific, almost unbelievable example of this sabotage in reality. During a protest organized by a student group called the Cockroach Janta Party, a man gave this shocking on-camera interview saying he fully supported dividing India into pieces. Naturally, this video immediately went viral. It was pushed by commentators as solid proof that the protesting students were just anti-national traitors. But the actual truth? The guy was a plant. A known internet troll later publicly admitted that he had sent his associate there as a secret agent specifically to say outrageous things and discredit the movement. And when the whole plot was exposed, he just tried to brush it off as a joke. So where does all of this leave the students and the teachers? Well, the source concludes with a very clear, powerful directive rooted in these 3 words: educate, agitate, organize. The underlying message here is that the systemic machinery, the government and the media, is terrified of this kind of unity. The source argues that the defamation of Khan Sir, the sudden property seizures, the planted fake agents, all of it amounts to desperate attempts to divide a public that is finally waking up and demanding real accountability for a broken education system. Which leaves us with this final, profound question to consider. In this crazy, complex web of coaching center rivalries, leaked national exams, and primetime TV debates, are the resulting media narratives actually helping us uncover the truth? Or, as the source heavily suggests, are they simply a tool being used to silence the loudest voices demanding accountability? It's a pretty fascinating look at the intersection of education, media power, and politics. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and we will see you next time.